Welcome to Jaed English Center.
It started with a sound, a soft cry from the room next to mine. At first, I thought it was just a dream, but that sound came every night, and soon I realized it was trying to tell me something. My name is Nadia. It all began on my very first night in the hostel, the night that changed everything. I had just moved to a new city to start my college life, far from my home, far from my family, and far from everything that felt safe. The hostel was an old gray building standing behind a row of tall, silent trees. Its walls were covered with marks of time, cracks running down like thin veins. The windows made soft, rattling noises whenever the wind blew. Inside, the air smelled of old paint, rainwater, and something else, something I couldn't name. My room was on the second floor. I was supposed to share it with two girls, Ria and Sana. They seemed nice, quiet, and busy with their phones. The warden had warned us to stay inside after 10 p.m. and never walk around the corridor at night. I laughed when I heard that. It sounded silly then, but that night, I understood why. Our room had one small bulb hanging from the ceiling. It flickered every few minutes. The fan above made a soft whirring sound that mixed with the faint noise of crickets outside. Ria had already fallen asleep. Sana was listening to music with her earphones in. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about home. It was around 2 a.m. when I first heard it. A faint sound, like someone crying. At first, I thought I was dreaming. I even closed my eyes and tried to ignore it, but the sound grew a little clearer. It wasn't loud. It was soft, broken, and full of pain. A girl's voice, crying slowly as if trying not to be heard. I froze. The sound was coming from the room next to ours, the one that was always locked. Earlier that evening, Sana had told me no one stayed there. "It's empty," she said, "has been for years." But now someone, or something, was inside. I sat up and looked around. The clock on the wall showed 2:13 a.m. The light flickered again, making the shadows on the walls dance. My throat felt dry. I whispered, "Ria, are you awake?" No reply. Both girls were deep in sleep. The crying continued for a few more minutes. Slow, soft, and heartbreaking. It felt so real, so close. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence. Only the ticking of the clock filled the room. I waited, listening. My heart was beating fast. Who was crying in that locked room? Was someone hurt? Or was it something else? I wanted to get up, knock on the door next to ours, and check. But something inside me said no. The air around me felt colder. My hands were shaking slightly. I pulled my blanket over my head, trying to calm down. Minutes passed, maybe hours. I didn't even realize when I finally fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the window. The hostel looked peaceful again, as if nothing strange had happened. Ria was brushing her hair. Sana was still half asleep. I hesitated before asking, "Did you guys hear anything last night?" Ria frowned. "No, what do you mean?" "Like someone crying." Sana looked up from her bed and gave a weak smile. "You must have dreamed it. Everyone says new girls imagine things their first night here." I nodded slowly. Maybe she was right, but deep inside, I knew it wasn't a dream. That sound was real, and something about that locked room didn't feel normal. As I got ready for class, I looked once more at the closed door next to ours. The same dusty lock hung on it, the same silence behind it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, had been there last night, crying in the dark. And I knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, I gathered my courage and went to the warden's office. She was sitting behind her wooden desk, reading some papers. Sunlight from the window fell across her face, making her glasses shine. I cleared my throat and asked softly, "Ma'am, who stays in the room next to ours?" She looked up at me and smiled quickly, almost too quickly. "No one stays there now," she said. I frowned. "But why is it locked?" Her smile faded for a second. She paused, adjusted her glasses, and then replied, "It's under repair. Old plumbing issues. Nothing serious." Her tone was calm, but her eyes looked away from mine. Something about the way she spoke didn't feel right. She wasn't telling me everything. I left the office, but the question stayed with me. Days passed. Life at college became a routine. Classes, assignments, new friends, laughter in the canteen. Everything seemed normal during the day. But at night, when the hostel grew quiet, the same sound returned. Every night, around 2 a.m., I heard it again, the soft, sad crying, lonely, helpless, almost pleading. Sometimes I covered my ears. Sometimes I tried to hum a song, but nothing worked. The sound always reached me, and the room next door remained locked, silent by day, alive by night. One evening, we were cleaning our room before a surprise inspection. I was pulling out the boxes from under my bed when my hand touched something rough. I dragged it out. It was an old, dusty diary. Its cover was torn, and the edges were stained with something brownish, like old tea or rust. Curious, I opened it. On the very first page, written in neat handwriting, were the words, "My name is Aisha. This hostel is my new world." I froze. Aisha. My heart skipped a beat. That was the name I had seen scratched faintly on the peeling wall near the locked room next door. I turned the pages slowly. The diary smelled of paper and sadness. Aisha wrote about her life at the hostel, her excitement on the first day, her dreams, her struggles. She wrote about her fear of exams, her loneliness in a new city, and how her only friend had moved away to another college. She wrote about crying at night because she missed her parents, because she felt invisible in a place full of people. Her words were soft at first, like whispers from the past. But then the tone of the diary began to change. The handwriting became shaky, the ink darker, the words more desperate. Greater than, "They don't believe me, they think I'm crazy, but someone keeps knocking on my door every night at 2 a.m. My hands began to tremble. The fan above me whirred louder, but the room suddenly felt cold. I swallowed hard and turned the page. There were only 3 words written in red ink, greater than "Make it stop." The words stared back at me like a scream frozen on paper. After that, the diary ended. No more pages, no more words, just silence. I sat there on the floor, holding the diary close to my chest, as if it were a piece of Aisha herself. The walls around me felt tighter. The flickering bulb buzzed softly, casting long shadows across the room. I glanced at the locked door next to ours. Had Aisha stayed there? Had she been the one crying? Or was something else still there, repeating the same night after night? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a story anymore. This was real, and it was only getting darker. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. The room was dark, the fan was spinning slowly above me, and the faint smell of rain lingered in the air. I lay on my bed, staring at the cracked wall that separated our room from the locked room next door. My mind kept drifting back to Aisha, the girl whose diary I had found just a few days ago. Her words, her cries, her fear, they all felt real now. Exactly at 2:13 a.m., the air seemed to shift. A cold breeze brushed my face, And then I heard it. The soft, broken, lonely cry I had grown to recognize. It came from the next room. My heart thumped loudly in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears. I felt the instinct to hide, to pull the blanket over my head, but something inside me pushed me forward. This was no longer just a sound. It was a plea. Something needed help. I stood up slowly, my bare feet brushing against the cold floor. Every step towards the door felt heavier than the last. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. I took a deep breath and knocked lightly. "Hello, is anyone there?" My voice sounded small, almost scared. For a moment there was silence, just the sound of my own breathing. Then a faint whisper floated through the door, chilling me to the bone, greater than "help me." My heart stopped. I froze, unsure if I had really heard it. The whisper came again, clearer this time, filled with desperation. I backed away quickly and ran to the warden's room. My shoes clattered on the floor as I burst inside. "Ma'am!" "Something is happening. The crying. It's real. Please, you have to help," I gasped, clutching my chest. The warden looked at me with pale eyes, her face drawn and serious. She had known all along. I could feel it. Finally, in a quiet, low voice, she spoke. 3 years ago, a girl named Aisha lived in that room. She was quiet, always kept to herself. She didn't bother anyone, and she barely spoke. One night, she never woke up. That room has been closed ever since I felt my throat dry up. My hands shook, my stomach twisted with a strange mix of fear and sorrow. I had known something was wrong, but I hadn't imagined the truth could be so tragic. The next morning, I asked the warden again about the room. This time, there were no lies. She confirmed it had been locked ever since Aisha's death, untouched and silent, except for the sounds that some said were echoes of the past. That evening, I found myself standing near the door again. The corridor was quiet, shadows stretching across the cracked walls. I lowered my voice and whispered softly, "Aisha, if you can hear me, you're not alone anymore." The air around me felt colder, almost alive, brushing against my skin like a gentle hand. For the first time, there was no crying, no lonely whispers, just silence. A calm, peaceful silence. I felt tears prick at my eyes, not from fear this time, but from relief. Perhaps Aisha had finally found peace. Perhaps her spirit had been waiting for someone to notice, to care, to speak to her. Days turned into weeks. Every time I walked past that locked room, I felt a strange warmth in my chest. I would glance at it, and a small smile would appear on my face. Aisha was gone. Or maybe she was still there, quietly watching, no longer afraid, no longer crying. Sometimes, when the hostel was quiet at night, I would swear I could feel a presence beside me, a gentle nudge of comfort, a reminder that she had been heard, that she had been remembered. And I understood something important that night. Loneliness can leave scars that last longer than life itself. But kindness, attention, and understanding, even from someone far away, can bring peace, even to a restless soul. I will never forget Aisha, the girl who cried at 2 a.m., the girl whose diary spoke louder than anyone in the world, the girl whose whispers taught me the power of listening, caring, and acknowledging someone's pain. Now, when new girls join the hostel, I always tell them, listen, observe, care. Because sometimes a quiet voice in the night is not just imagination. It's a story. It's a cry for help. And if you are brave enough to hear it, you might just change a life or bring peace to a lost soul. And as for me, Nadia, I will always remember that first night. It taught me fear, yes, but also courage. Loneliness, yes, but also hope. And the most important lesson of all, every voice matters, even the ones that seem the quietest, the ones that appear long gone. From that night onwards, the hostel never felt the same. It was no longer just walls and rooms. It was a place where stories lived. And sometimes, those stories whispered back. That's how my first nights in the hostel changed my life forever. I met fear, loneliness, and the unknown, but I also learned courage, empathy, and hope. Aisha's story reminded me that even the quietest voices matter. Sometimes all it takes is someone to listen, to care, to acknowledge another's pain. Now, every time I walk past that room, I feel peace. And I hope wherever Aisha is, she finally found it too. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Jaed English Center for more real, mysterious, and thrilling stories. Remember, every sound has a story, every whisper has a meaning, and sometimes the most ordinary places hide extraordinary secrets. Stay safe, stay curious, and keep listening.